live now, here to chat about tonight's episode of Arrow. Hold on, let me tweet. Okay. Which was entitled Leap of Faith. It was episode 3 of season 8. And if I sound weird at all during this, it's because I cannot feel half of my face. Half my mouth specifically. But it's fine. We're fine. We're just going to chat about this. And, I put lipstick on, so who can tell? Tonight's episode of Arrow was taking place mostly in Nanda Parbat, which I can't say, and back in the day when the entire season was set there, so season 3. I used to make fun of the actors or whatever being struggling to say it, and I had never really tried to say it out loud that much myself, and I was like, oh, hold on, that actually is really difficult for me to say. Anyways, welcome. We're going to start off, as we always do, with rating the episode on a scale from 1 to 5. I would also love to know in the chat your guesses on which half of my face I can feel. Can I feel this? This is my left side. My left side or my right side? Let me know down below. How obvious is it that I can't feel anything and I'm super dragged up? Okay, I would episode a really solid 3.5 to 4 range personally, just because I was so sold on the idea of Thea coming back. There was really very little they could do that would make me not like it, I suppose. It's been such a long time since we've seen her, and back when she was still on and we knew that she was going to leave, my big thing was Thea is a bit of a linchpin in the show. Not that she was my favorite character, she was one of my favorites, but she was a linchpin in the show in that without her, you really lose any family tie with Oliver. You lose his connection to the Queen family. She was the last one left. And it was a different type of connection that he had to her than he would have to his mother or Walter or even Robert, because he was extremely protective of her, right? So it's a way for Oliver to show his sort of protectiveness, I suppose, towards family that then got generalized to protectiveness to Star City, which then is now getting generalized to protectiveness of the entire universe. And Thea was kind of a stand-in for that, and I wasn't quite sure how they would be able to do that without her, because I wasn't sold on their ability to do that with William necessarily. They ended up doing a pretty good job, but I wasn't sure if it would work. Building the Queen family around him, they eventually did right after she left or during her leaving, with Felicity, William, Reza to an extent, whatever, worked and helped with that, but it's very, very difficult to replace Thea as a concept, as a character as well, because I think she's been portrayed wonderfully, written, highs and lows, just like all characters on here, but as a concept, that's one where a lot of times you have somebody like a sidekick or a best friend or whatever that's really hard to replace, and then you have some characters that are pretty easy to replace, like the foil or the random funny person, whatever, that if one of them were to leave, you could kind of create a new character of that type and have them take that place. Thea's place in the storyline wasn't like that. It was almost impossible to replace her. So having her come back, I guess, it's a really long-winded way of saying having her come back is really nice. Kate Johnson gives this a 4 out of 5. Stormy's giving it a 4 out of 5. Carrie Johnson is giving it a 4.5 out of 5. 2 what the fuck endings in one episode. Boss. Only detraction is waiting to see where the Diggle and Lila story goes. But I love Audrey and David on camera. Oh my gosh, I love when this show has couples go undercover. It's this is obviously a superhero show, but when they have multiple characters go undercover, they do that spy show feel so well. Like when we had Diggle and Lila dancing and the whole thing. That was done so well. It really built up the whole tension between them and the angst of knowing all along that Lila's got this whole thing that she's working on with them. Anyways, I thought that was done really well, and I just love anytime they have them go undercover on the show, because it really highlights the fact that they're not metas. They can't just shapeshift. They can't just do whatever. They actually have to work within that realm of operation. So that's really fun. It's nice to see high ratings from everyone everybody, because for last week it was a lot lower for all of us, I would say. Oh, Brian Perez is chiming in, 4.5, best episode of the season so far. Ooh. Stormy says Diggle and Lila were giving off some major Mr. and Mrs. Smith vibes. I adore that movie way, way too much. Yeah, I love that. I loved the ending, that reassurance of seeing the kids back present day. Not just because it means that Zoe's going to live, which is nice, but watching Zoe die, I was like, what's the catch? They're not killing Zoe. It just doesn't make sense for the storyline and for the team for them to do that. So I didn't really buy it. I know she technically is dead in the future, and then they got sent back, but I feel like them getting sent back is going to be their way of saving her. I'm almost 100% sure, because I just don't see it. Let me know your thoughts on whether or not she's actually dead or not. I just don't buy it. So as she was dying, I was like, there's a catch. This isn't going to go through. Having them show up in the future was perfect, and that's going to allow Oliver and Mia to really develop that bond that will allow him to pass off the mantle. So I'm glad that this is happening now and not like mid-season or anything, because it'll have some time for them to actually get to fight alongside each other, for her to train with him and so on. And then obviously William coming back is cool, and I foresee him filling a bit of a Felicity standpoint, or a Felicity role on the team, which is great because obviously he trained under Felicity, and I'm sure Connor coming back is going to play into this whole JJ bit. You know, last week I really thought they were going to go on some sort of redemption path with JJ, and I didn't really want it, but I thought that's what they were doing. Now, seeing what they're doing with him, I really wonder, A, if they are going down a redemption path with him at all, and B, if they are, it may be a bit of a longer stretch, not really like something that's going to get resolved in a couple episodes. Ben Levine said, Thea looked pretty hot tonight, couldn't stop looking at her. Oh, Ben, I'm right there with you. I thought she... Listen, her eye makeup, by the way, so she obviously is usually wearing like this burgundy type of color. It's like her speedy color. Her eye makeup was matched perfectly to it, and it was really pretty, and she's got really pretty eyes. Anyways, thank you for listening to my TED Talk. Stormy says, last week had a lot of Laurel, this week had none of that, so that alone was an improvement. Yeah, I just connected more to the storylines this week, right? Like, Thea as a character is so critical. Diggle and Lila as characters are so critical, and we can absolutely invest in them, and even when they're on kind of mysticism-based Earth, like, Nanda Parbat isn't a separate Earth, but like a mysticism-based setting like Nanda Parbat, you can still, you know, suspend disbelief and get involved in the mysticism, and also get attached to these characters and what they're going through because you've attached to them previously. And I think that's the struggle I'm having with having an episode like last week that was so centered around Earth 2 Siren. We're not connected to her. We don't really know much about what she's doing, so that made that episode fall flat for, I think, all of us, whereas seeing characters like Thea become one of the most powerful people in the universe, you know, she's got these stories to tell the scars, like, I would absolutely watch a spin-off of her. Yeah, Ben Levine says the scar on women usually does it for me. Yeah, it was fantastic, wasn't it? Right there with you. I just bit my lip. This is difficult. Anyways, no worries. Lipstick covering up the fact that I can't feel half my face. Kate Johnson says, Diggle's and Oliver's perspective of the destruction of Earth 2 was so much better in purpose and execution than Laurel's. Yeah, and really that's what we're looking for. Now, I know they were trying to give it sort of that personal feel, like the one person who escaped, but I think if they had had an entirely new character escape from Earth 2, we might have even connected to it more. I don't know. Stormy says, love Thea and Talia teaming up to have the League of Heroes. Talia saying her dad would be aghast made me laugh. Yeah, and you can see like Oliver's reaction to it, like Oliver knew, because back in the day, Ra's al Ghul, like, he was a good villain, but they really did play with this idea of misogyny, homophobia, like all that sort of just archaic bullshit with him making Talia or Nyssa marry Oliver, and it was like this sort of fake, non-existent marriage, and then just the way he treated women in general. And there was a scene he had with Felicity at one point where he's sort of trying to make her feel small. It's like on the edge of the Lazarus pit, or near the Lazarus pit, I believe, and she kind of has to stand up to him, and that was really cool. Okay. Stormy also says, I'm so happy that Mia and William will get to see their dad. When she said dad at the end, I was in tears. Yeah, wasn't that great? Because when we first see Mia way back when, she is kind of anti-Oliver, not anti-vigilante necessarily, but she's just got a chip on her shoulder about her mom and her dad, really. And to see how far she's come, even without necessarily having exposure to him recently or anything, although I will say I do suspect we have already seen Oliver in the future, glimpses of him. Stormy, I think it was you that had a really good theory about that before. I think we will see actual future Oliver in the future as well, but I'm glad that we're seeing future Mia and team come back to the past, and that's going to be fantastic. And we got to see Oliver back in the, kind of Arrow Cave setting on what appears to be his normal Earth, with a few remaining members of his normal team. We saw Renee, Dinah, and Diggle. I think that's it that we saw there at the end. So yeah, Stormy's confirming us her. Yeah, I also like. So there was a moment in the episode where William was explaining how he got away from the Deathstroke goons, and he was saying he remembered how Mom had hardwired the floor, and he used that to fry them, and that was just a really cool moment. They're really playing into this idea of Mia being Oliver and William being Felicity. I think that's cute. Storm says, get ready for more tears when Mia tells Oliver how hard the 20 years have been for her and Felicity. Yeah, it will be. So let me ask you guys, having just seen the episode, as I just have just a few minutes ago, what is it that you have as a storyline that you want to see more of going forward? So we had the Diggle storyline tonight with Lila. So Lila's partnership with the Monitor is still a piece to be exposed, that they kind of had that tear-jerking moment at the end talking about. We had Thea teaming up with Talia throughout this episode. I don't suspect we're going to get to see a lot more of them this season, but they may come back into play at some point. We had, obviously, our Team Arrow 2040 team now running into some pretty significant violent fights with JJ, not just verbal taunts, and potentially losing a team member to him and showing back up in present day. Which of those things are you really hoping to see a lot of going forward? Stormy says, oh, yeah, the Mia telling Oliver about the 20 years she had with Felicity. I would say that is what I am looking forward to going forward, is this really rare opportunity for Arrow, at least, because they don't do time travel. They are not the Flash. They don't just kind of do things like that helter-skelter. This is the one time they have to really play with this idea of Oliver getting to interact with his adult children, which he would otherwise never have had a chance to do because he is planning to die in crisis. So this will give him that very limited opportunity. And it also, I think, will give some valuable information to the present day team about what happens following the crisis, or what could happen following the crisis. Again, they've always referred to the future as a hypothetical possible future. Kate says, I'm glad the two major storylines are converging. I don't have to sacrifice my Oliver time while I can still get some Mia and William. I know on the Arrow Squad podcast that I do, it had come up with both my co-host and I think a couple of viewers had mentioned that they were getting tired of the future scenes taking up so much story time. And it wasn't that they were tired of the future scene, the future team itself, but having them take up story time away from Oliver's very limited journey was becoming difficult. So, Kate, I agree that that's going to be a nice resolution of that hole between the two. I, for one, was more invested in the 2040 team than the actual Team Arrow-ish that we saw last week. So I didn't mind it last week, but this week, as I was enjoying the present day stuff, I did start to feel that tension, that pull of, we want more time to wrap up the Queen journey and the Arrow journey, and we also want this time to see these new kids, so putting that together would be nice. Carrie says, I want to see Ollie question the Monitor and get some insight about the Anti-Monitor. Yeah, I would like to see that as well. I think Oliver standing up to the Monitor is going to take time. Like, him just being resistant and maybe not following a little mission, but standing up to his concepts and the drive behind his mission and determining whether he shares that, I think will be an interesting piece that they'll probably save towards closer to the crossover. Stormy says, Oliver getting to know his daughter and son, for me, that's going to be the most emotional without Felicity. Yeah, it will be emotional to see that happen without Felicity. But in the storyline, we do have, Felicity's had a lot of time with Mia. She had, back in the day, a good amount of time with William, and they were tragically all pulled apart in their own way. So now we're getting to see Oliver have a little bit of time and will also be tragically pulled apart from them in some way. Probably dying. I don't think they're faking us out. Stormy also says, Dig finding out about Lila and the Monitor is going to be interesting. Also, how did they come to adopt Connor? Because his parents are still alive in this episode. Yeah, I'm curious about that as well. They seem to insinuate in his talk with JJ last week that the adoption of Connor into the Diggle family had to have occurred at least, at some point in childhood, because there was that moment where they were talking about like middle school or high school, some, bullying, or I don't remember what was happening at school, but there was something that was happening to them at school in some way. Carrie says, by the way, the Monitor having others do his bidding is so Thanos-like. Yeah, the Monitor is absolutely Thanos. Like, 100%. Like, the ending of episode 1 of this season definitely confirmed that they're going full Thanos. Okay, so I don't want to keep you guys too much later. So I will wrap this up, but if you have any other thoughts or questions, feel free to put them in the chat box down below, or my information is also in the description. You can go chat with me on Twitter about Arrow, and if you like, I also, as I mentioned earlier, I co-host a podcast that records on Thursday nights, and you're welcome to write in some feedback for that and listen to a couple different perspectives on the last season of Arrow on there. Stormy also says, I love Thea saying that their parents are the ones who turned into heroes. It's the same for Mia and William. Yeah, and I like that acknowledgement that the flawed Queen parents still did produce heroes, and it gives that sense of comfort that the flawed Queen parents, Oliver and Felicity, also could produce heroes, and these flawed heroes in 2040 can also sort of shepherd their own team as they move forward as well with their spinoff that I'm very excited to see. Okay, that's all. I will let you guys go. It was great chatting with you about a more positive episode with a more positive reaction this week, and fingers crossed that next week stays the same. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.